Welcome to the second Global Symposium on Technology-Facilitated Gender-Based Violence, and this year supported with the eSafety Commissioner of Australia. We're delighted you can join us from all over the world, and I know we're all very keen to get started. My name's Alexandra Robinson. I'm the Gender-Based Violence Technical Advisor in the Technical Division of UNFPA, based in headquarters. As we noted or signaled or have set out in the agenda for the event, the Global Symposium has been divided into two key sections every day. The first part of the section is a webinar, so it's a plenary session when we're going to hear from a number of speakers through two different panels. It's live recorded. It's also live streamed on UNFPA Events YouTube channel. And for your security and safety, we've turned off the chat, Q&A, and other functions in the session. We do, however, have a second session as part of the program where we have unrecorded breakout sessions, and that's where anyone who joins will have an opportunity to join that breakout room on a particular topic with any of the expert speakers, where those speakers can share more information about their topic, and there's a general opportunity for further discussion. And during those breakout sessions, UNFPA staff and volunteers will be moderating those sessions to enable a discussion or to enable a respectful discussion. So, and in registering this event, I just want to reiterate that we've all agreed to make this a safe space for all, and we would value and appreciate respectful communications. So with that, I'm now incredibly honoured and excited to be able to kick off this year's TF GBV Global Symposium with opening remarks from Ms. Verena Winder and Dr. Julita Onabanjo. But first, Ms. Verena Winder, the Chief of Staff for the Secretary of State's Office of Global Women's Issues at the Department of State in the United States. Verena, I hand the floor to you.
Thanks so much, Alex, and really just a huge congratulations to you, to UNFPA, to Julie and Grant's team for organizing what is sure to be an excellent event and across 2 days, because of course we have just way too much to discuss. I'm so pleased to be invited back for this second Global Symposium on Tech-Facilitated Gender-Based Violence. And as the opening, I just wanted to take a moment to reflect back on where we were last year, where it's really just was the beginning of a conversation. And over the last year, it has been just so remarkable to witness the progress made by all of you, by global community advocates, survivors, to really center ourselves on this topic. Unfortunately, that's really necessary progress because the pace of development and the acceleration of new technologies that have come online even just since last year that are now being used as weapons and as tools of GBV is unfortunately increasing even faster. I'm here because the US government is really keen to do our part. I'm really proud to be part of an office that's really at the cutting edge of pushing that thinking and to work with such fabulous advocates such as Alex and Dr. Julita, who's coming on in just a few minutes, as well as Julie. We lead something, the US government leads something called the Global Partnership for Action on Gender-Based Violence, Online Harassment and Abuse. It's a big mouthful, so we generally just refer it to as the Global Partnership, because it's a coalition of 14 countries committed to addressing TF GBV together with an external multi-stakeholder advisory group. We've been able to do at least 3 really important things over the past year. So one, on the policy angle, we've been advancing shared principles, elevating the issue of TF GBV in a range of multilateral policy instruments and fora. Of course, a notable example being last year's agreed conclusions of the CSW, or Commission on the Status of Women. 2, we've really been pushing the edge on when it comes to data, because we know what gets measured can be addressed. So we're partnering with international organizations, including many of those on the call today, to facilitate the inclusion of metrics on TF GBV across various survey instruments and data collection tools, such as, of course, the renowned UN Statistical Commission. And third, we're all developing, and I know that we'll hear a lot more about what various folks are doing here today, new domestic, regional, and global programs to address TF-GBV, because unlike a lot of issues, this is really a transnational problem. From the US Department of State, where I sit, we've invested over $7 million in programs focused on TF-GBV, and we expect and we hope to grow that. One program I'm particularly proud to highlight was launched by my office this past fall. She Leads, which is a great acronym, sets out to make online spaces and digital platforms safer to all, together with our partners Search for Common Ground, who are leading a consortium of local civil society partners in South and Central Asia. I'll just take a note and note that this issue has been a part of my role and a part of every single trip that I've taken over the past year. I'm thinking of conversations I've had in Kenya and also in Iceland, in Panama, in India, in New York, and London. I've spoken with women, and especially young women, about the online threats they're receiving as a result of just simply using their voice in a public space. And to be honest, like many of you tuning in, I'm no stranger to this phenomenon either. And what's happening is that we are
We might have a breakdown in the connection from Verena. I'm sorry, I think we might have a breakdown in the connection from Verena. I'll just give it a few moments before we move on.
Verena, if you can turn your camera on, if you're back in, then we can put you back on the screen. And Alex, I'm not seeing Verena responding to that. We can give it another moment, and then we may need to move to our next speaker. I'll defer to you.
I'm really sorry, Alex. This is the dangers of tech, of not being able to trust tech, because it's actually not entirely reliable. I'll wrap myself up, though, because I think we have to move on, because I do want to flag just one program. I talked about how we've invested $7 million. We're really looking to partner with all of you to really grow that number, because, as I mentioned, everywhere we've traveled, we've talked with women about this. It's really a democracy issue. And we've heard, it's one thing to think and plan and do policy, et cetera. And it's another really to be responsive to what women and girls are facing in that exact moment when they're scared and they have to deregister their business, or they have to move houses, or they have to tell their child while they're crying in a bathroom. So that's why our office has recently released a solicitation for a new project that will be designed to provide rapid response support to especially women politicians. We've all heard that we're in the year of the women of elections, and so we're really focusing on them, as well as political candidates, civil society leaders who are experiencing extreme forms of TF-GBV. And we have really big goals for this program. We know that not just one organization will be able to fulfill it. We want to provide flexible support for individuals' immediate financial needs, for their legal needs, for medical needs, for psychosocial needs, for technical support needs. We want to foster safe spaces for the larger community and to learn amongst all of you. So we are really looking forward to who responds to this. We know that it will be a consortium organization of some sort, and everything is due March 5th. So thank you in advance for your thoughtful ideas. Thank you in advance for your partnership. And I'm excited really to tune in to the rest of today's conversation and apologize for my own tech glitches. Thanks, and back to you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Verena. I don't think any online event would be complete without a glitch somewhere along the way. So with that, I will now turn to Dr. Julita Onabanjo, who is the Technical Division Director of UNFPA, for opening remarks. Thank you, Julita.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. It is such a special pleasure, I think, for me to be with you at the second UNFPA Global Symposium on technology facilitated gender-based violence, and really to share this opening segment with Verena, who honestly, you always do it for me in terms of just enlightening and engaging and bringing energy. And so I really do congratulate you on all the work that the United States government is doing under your leadership. Indeed, you said it is a democratic issue. I'm also inspired by the so many people that have tuned in, and I'd like to pay special recognition to all those that are going to make this 3-day symposium really happen. So really welcome. I think when UNFPA launched the first technology facilitated GBV symposium in November 2022, it was in recognition that at many levels there was expertise and really different disciplines that needed to come together and connect and be brought together really in order to address what we felt was really a mounting issue. Since then, as Verena has said, we've seen such progress, and it's really enlightening. A lot of attention has been brought to this issue, and indeed, we really do recognize the role that the Global Partnership for Action on Gender-Based Violence, Online Harassment and Abuse, and the member states that have come together to make that happen, but also very significant the advisory group and all those, the civil society, the academia that have been working on this issue, I think, for a lot more, and that we've learned a lot from. So really just a special recognition from the UNFPA's part for all that has been going on and all that continues to go on. And again, Verena, the excitement of new ideas like She Leads and others. So for us at UNFPA, addressing technology facilitated GBV is a priority. It is intrinsic to ensuring rights and choices for all. And right now, as we share the planet with 8 billion people, we are indeed recognizing that we need to celebrate technology. We need to celebrate the breakthroughs in science and medicine. For the UN system, technology is considered one of the 5 key megatrends shaping our future. We understand how powerful the impact can be. However, we must continue to spotlight that in as much as it transforms the lives of, and for us at the UN, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as they are for you, the upcoming Summit of the Future in September, the current negotiations around the Global Digital Compact provide all very critical moments for us as we ensure that gender and issues of gender protection are mainstreamed into these policy landscapes. I think clearly, as Verena said, women who really experience what online harassment is like cannot but remain centered in our minds, whether it's cyber stalking, online harassment, or non-consensual intimate image sharing, digital manipulations. Those are just some examples, and I know for the most part of this symposium, we will hear and continue to hear much of that. I think the others that sort of sit on our sort of radar are the issues around the extractive minerals and resources like lithium and cobalt in conflict-affected countries that continue to support development of new technologies, but really also give rise to greater insecurities, poverty, and gender-based violence. For us, it's clear that all safe play spaces need to be safe, whether they're online, whether it's in other parts of communities that sort of support technology. And so really, you know, and I wear my Body Right campaign, which calls for greater protection against all sorts of abuse, but particularly against digital abuse. We champion the B symbol, much like the C for copyright, to mark a symbol of empowerment of claiming full ownership of your image and body. And so far, that campaign, the Body Right campaign, and I encourage those to look into that, have gathered almost 50,000 signatories. So please sign up to our Body Right campaign. For us, we are clear: all women, girls have the right to safe space online, just as they have the right to safe space in the physical analog world. And to achieve this, it is crucial that access and use of technology be free and be fair and lack any intimidation. The data speaks for themselves, and I know you'll hear much about that in the course of the next 2 years. And so really what we wanted to just do as UNFPA, and really thanks to Alex and her brilliant leadership in this area of work, and I really want to give a shout out to her and her team at UNFPA. We really have been able to move quite a bit since the last symposium. I think we're clear in our definition of what technology facilitated GBV is. And in that sense, we're also working with the member states in designing legislations and policies that create even safer environments in the digital world, as well as the physical world for women and girls, including the measurements. And Verena spoke about data and measurements. For us, that is key. It's key in all aspects, whether it's in preventing technology-facilitated GBV or measuring effective survivor support. We're also working to enhance global action in this worldwide partnership, and really are proud to co-convene the advisory group. We feel that that is really critical to this global partnership for action. So we continue to be inspired by all those that have worked on this issue before, and particularly in the civil society space, and that they are being able to be brought into it. For us, ICPD 30 is a critical moment. It is 30 years since the International Conference on Population and Development. And so we're using every opportunity to really, again, put technology in the picture, and particularly technology-facilitated GBV. So we at the moment have developed a thematic, what we call a think piece, but it is actually a policy paper, and it's brief. And there will be a global, one of 3 global dialogues around ICPD 30 that will be focused on technology. That will be in June, July. And head into the Summit of the Future, as I said, and the Global Digital Compact work. We really are trying to, again, support member states and those who are able to negotiate that space, and really continuing to build the work around our innovation work. And so leading worldwide initiatives, including the Equity 2030 Alliance, to help address and close gender equity gaps across technology and science. We've also got what we call now a Women X Collective, which fosters innovation, research, and investment in women's health, again, to facilitate safe and ethical procedures around technology breakthroughs for women. So lots going on in UNFPA's camp, and again, we call to partners to continue to support us as we do that. In ending, I just really wanted to really just highlight maybe 4 or 5 things that are critical, I think, as we get to this moment on this piece of work that we do within the broader gender-based violence efforts. Again, it's evidence and research. I think that needs to be scaled up. I'm really thrilled that we're looking in this symposium at issues around programmatic work. And so what's an evaluative framework for programs on technology facilitated GBV. I think legislation can't stop. We need to be effective in our legislation and regulations, and really congratulations to, again, those who are working in this piece in this sector that is so critical for us to have. Of course, shifts in attitudes are key and fundamental. So what we do on the social media side, again, with big tech becomes really key. And of course, the partnership, but also financing. We never, when it comes to women's and gender issues, we never stop asking that indeed collective calls for more financing and sustainable investments in this area are critical. So with that, colleagues and, dear friends, again, let me underscore how vital the work to address technology facilitated GBV and GBV in general is for UNFPA. It's intrinsic to rights and choices. It's intrinsic to what we call our transformative results, where it's really woven within that, whether it's to end preventable maternal deaths and broader gender-based violence and harmful practices in family planning is unmet need. So over the next 3 days, the symposium, I think, will be important. All of us as a community, as we move forward in this area, I think it gives us strength to lean on and to learn and to listen to each other as we really, continue moving as champions to end technology-facilitated GBV. Lastly, let me just again thank Alex, but also the organizing and advisory group that's put this program together, and all the speakers who are going to, dynamically lead us through the rich agenda we have for you. From us at UNFPA, special thanks to everyone and continued strength and really power in our partnership to continue to make the world and the digital world safe. With that, I hand over back to Alex and look forward to the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julita and Verena, for such inspiring opening remarks. And as you say, as both of you say, the world is moving very, very quickly. And with that, we're moving into the first panel, which is about now and into the future. And it is a panel which is going to be looking at some of the key emerging issues and risks associated with immersive and new technologies, with a particular focus, obviously, on the impact on women and gender diverse communities. So with that, I'm going to introduce a moderator of this panel, Mariam Jobe. We're really pleased to have Mariam with us. She's a young writer and digital rights expert from the Gambia. So with that, Mariam, I will pass over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning or afternoon or evening, based on where you're joining us from. I'm super happy to be here with you today. And once again, thank you to the Global Symposium on Technology-Facilitated Gender-Based Violence. Today, we convene amidst a rapidly evolving digital landscape where technological advancements present both unprecedented opportunities and complex challenges, particularly concerning the safety and security of women and girls and children and the marginalized communities worldwide. This panel will set the tone for the day and, of course, for the rest of the symposium as well. And as we embark on this very critical dialogue, I believe it's very imperative to recognize the urgency of our collective efforts in addressing the pervasive issue of technology-facilitated gender-based violence. The purpose of this panel is to highlight emerging risks with immersive and new technology, with a particular focus on the impact that it has on women and gender diverse communities. We're also hoping to look at and discuss what has been done to address high-profile TF GBV harms and targets of technology-facilitated gender-based violence. For this, we have Joan Moolman, who is the co-executive director of Newman Fund. We have Sherman Sarbast from the Arabi Facts Hub, Nick Haddad from Digital Rights Foundation. We have Lionel Tanza, who is an associate professor in international security and emerging technologies at the University College London. We also have Kavya Perlman from X Reality Safety Intelligence. And last but not the least, we have Erica Olsen from Stop Soccer Coalition or Safety Net Project. Let the conversation begin. We will start with John Moolman from the Newman Fund. So Jean, please tell us, as someone who has dedicated close to 17 years to addressing technology-facilitated gender-based violence, what are your reflections on the current state of the field overall? And as we're navigating the intersection of technology and gender-based violence, how can initiatives like Newman Fund work towards ensuring that emerging technologies are leveraged for positive impact while mitigating potential harms, particularly those associated with generative AI? You have the floor.
Big question. Thanks, Mariam. As Mariam said, I'm Jan Morman, and I'm the co-cartographer at the Newman Fund, which is the first and only fund set up to resource and support activism at the intersection of technology and feminism. And our reason for existing really is to seed, grow, and sustain an ecosystem of feminist activists who can define, imagine, and create technology for the world we want. And the world we want is a world without violence. And for the purposes of today, it's a world without technology-facilitated violence against women and girls. I was asked to, and as Alex said in the beginning, this is about the present and the future, but I don't think we can ever talk about the future or the present without reflecting on the past. And I think at a moment where I think the first speaker spoke about how technology is evolving so rapidly. There's lots of feelings of powerlessness and anxiety. How can we keep up? I thought a useful way to start would be just to take us back a little bit to 2006, which is like 18 years ago, if my maths is right. It might be wrong. When the first Take Back the Tech campaign was launched. And that was a campaign which saw technology not only as a tool, but a site for activism and politics and pleasure and fun. And it was really about how using technology to end violence against women and girls. And that campaign still goes on today, 18 years ago. Between 2006 and 2018, we saw lots and lots of more organizations and people and interest in looking at technology, TF GBV. And I always stumble on that word because in the evolution of the work, the language has also changed. So I think that's also important. And there are organizations like NIGATS in Pakistan, the Digital Rights Foundation, Kictanet in Kenya, Derechos Digitales in Latin America. And these are only a few of the ones that we know. There really are many, many more. And of course, another very big moment in this work was 2018, when there was finally the recognition that TF GBV is a human rights violation. And if we think about the evolution of rights, it's been quite a short while, right? In this issue really becoming so much focus and so much attention, even within the international human rights system, which brings us to now, where even as we are looking forward and are, about to take on, or already are taking on this big task, we also have focus and attention. We have all the actors who need to be involved, business, states, CSOs, academics, the technical community. And all of these things are part of the programming. These actors are part of the programming, they're part of the financing, they're part of the resourcing, and also part of the solutions to be able to arrive at this world that we want. And so I want to just point to three points, I guess, or three moments that mark the context of this conversation right now. The first is that responding to TF GBV has to be intersectional. If there's something that we've learned over the last slightly more than a decade, we cannot approach this from the perspective of a single silo. All we have to do, for example, is to look at how a climate justice woman human rights defender is experiencing particularly targeted attacks, all for the purpose of undermining the work that they're doing on climate justice or extractivism. And that's an example that I think can resonate with many. The second moment that we are at is that TF GBV has become a catch-all for many different kinds of things: hate speech, disinformation, AI bias, harassment. And so for programming to be responsive to the actual particularities of experiences, it's also really important that we begin to unpick and unravel what these different dimensions mean. And lastly, which I think is very important, particularly given the huge focus and anxiety around AI, is that even as we look to the future and new technologies, it is really important that we maintain a focus on what is happening now. And those are still terrible to even say more traditional forms of TF-GBV, but we still need to address stalking, we still need to address harassment, and we still need to address TF-GBV that is not only that doesn't only involve AI and generative AI. But I was asked to briefly comment on generative AI. So all I'm going to do is just mention a few of the impacts that we are seeing in this area. So the first one, and there's just four. The first one really is that there's more convincing fake media that's around, and that is being generated in huge volumes and disseminated massively. So that obviously has an impact on both the impact of individuals, but also the impact on communities. The third piece is around and this is an area that I'm also still learning around, synthetic histories and computational deepfakes, right? And this is really about combining different media sources, which on the surface seem quite disconnected, right? But when put together, it literally becomes a kind of story, a view that is corroborated from many different views. And we see this particularly in the context of more public figures, journalists, human rights defenders, politicians, or people seeking office. And the last really is around interactive deepfakes. And this is more around voice cloning, impersonation, and a simple example is impersonating someone in a way that you can use to track down a survivor. So you pretend to be someone else and you get information and then you can track. But all of these issues still have their root causes in what we know about gender-based violence more generally. I want to quickly move on to the second part of Mariam's question before I run out of time. And that is really about how initiatives like New Moon can work towards ensuring that we are maintaining both the focus on emerging tech, the possibilities and the benefits, but also while countering the kind of harm. The first thing, and I was really pleased to see Julieta mention it earlier on, obviously is financing. We need adequate resourcing and finance mechanisms to be able to reach programming where programming is happening. And where programming is happening is often at much more local, national context with organizations and people who are working within communities that are affected. I think a big part of this call is because when we launched our call in 2022, we received 2,000 expressions of interest with a broad call around feminism tech. The most of them were around online safety and gender-based violence online. Out of the 200, we received 800 applications. We could only support 43. So the need is there and it needs to be matched with adequate resourcing that reaches communities and survivors and victims where they are. I think the second issue is around supporting a wide range of programming responses. And that also includes work around policy and governance, capacity building, media literacy, digital security, and very importantly, accompaniment of victims and survivors to follow this pathway of ultimately achieving justice. And I think the other thing, as important, but I think needs much more visibility, is to support the building and designing and deployment of feminist tech. So feminist tech activists, people working on GBV, people working on human rights, tech developers need to come together and have the kinds of conversations that are responding to need and experience as described by people who are experiencing them. So that tech responses and other kinds of responses are not developed in a vacuum.
Yes, John, I believe that these are very, very important points. And I really like how you highlighted that, before we can talk about now and the future, we need to go back to the past. And I think it's very important because some of the challenges that kind of brought us to where we are today still exist, even though they were from ages ago and all of that. And women are always the most vulnerable, be it online or offline. So I think it's very important that you pointed that out. And I know that we're going to delve more into the points that you've listed out because these are very important things. We have the breakout sessions that we will get into later, so we can delve more into that and engage with the audience to also, have their input and all of that. Because time's not on our side, we're going to have to move on to the next speaker. We have For that, we have Shriman Sarbas, who is the project manager of Arabi Facts Hub. She is going to be speaking to us next. Shriman, are you here?
Mariam, I think she's had some issues. So I think in that case, we can just move straight on to
Oh, right. Okay. Well, that's fine. We're gonna go ahead with Nick Haddad from the Digital Rights Foundation. In that case, are you online, Nick Haddad?
Yes, I am.
Yes, perfect. Welcome, and you have the floor.
Mariam, can you please ask the question?
Okay, yes. All right. So I wanted to talk about, in the realm of combating technology facilitated gender-based violence, what are the most pressing regulatory gaps or challenges in addressing the intersection of artificial intelligence and online abuse, and what role can policymakers and stakeholders play in trying to fill these gaps effectively?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for asking this very important question. And I think I'll build upon what Jan already mentioned in terms of the structural sort of issues around tech facilitated gender-based violence. Also, when we started working on this issue decades ago, it was online violence against women, then online gender-based violence. Now it is called tech facilitated gender-based violence. So the evolution of terminology is also very interesting for us to witness. But I would say that the existing issue of TFGBV is still there. It is existing, and then the new emerging technologies are actually adding into this existing issue. So I think we need to look into, when we talk about gaps or solutions, we really need to look into what we are trying to address here. Are we trying to address the technology issue, or are we trying to address the structural problem? But at the same time, I would like to talk about the way policymakers around the world are basically trying to address tech facilitated gender-based violence, which is now facilitated by a generative AI or automation on these platforms. But also, I would say like the companies who are basically creating these new emerging technologies. It seems that UK online safety bill will introduce a range of criminal offenses, which sort of include people who are encouraging self-harm, sharing pornographic deepfake images, and taking and sharing down blousing images, cyber flashing, things like that. So we can see the deepfake word has been used here. So it means that policymakers are trying to sort of address the issue in real time, while emerging technologies are sort of taking a center stage in these conversations. But that was only done in 2023. And if we sort of see the way we have been discussing this challenge, it's been several years of that several years of this technology and form of abuse being present. In the US, for instance, it is only after Taylor Swift's deep fakes were circulated on the internet that policymakers were stirred to act on legislating against the form of online violence that has been targeting women for years. And I kind of question, why has it taken a celebrity to face this, to recognize this as a real issue that should have been addressed by law much earlier, or by platforms? Any laws that policymakers are looking into now should make sure that the burden does not lie on the victims and survivors. That's what we have been saying for years now, that the penalty should be proportionate to the consequences and effects that a victim bears as a result of TFGBV or AI-related TFGBV, including psychological, social, financial aspects of it. laws should also, I think it's important for policymakers to see that the way they are, it's not really as simple to address AI facilitated TF GBV. It's not just image abuse, but like it's very sophisticated deep fake audio and video as well, which I feel is struggle, like companies, social media platforms are still struggling how to address that when it comes to technology. So I think it's a huge challenge for policymakers to see how they will address that in the laws and policies. And laws need to be equitable for everyone, not just useful for folks in the global north or celebrities with international power. In Pakistan, while the law does cover sexualized images of person, it only covers the public transmission or exhibition of such images, which is a loophole. I mean, just talking like localized version of a law. And it's a loophole that is abused by many perpetrators, and which sort of affects the ability of victims and survivors to preemptively take measures before the images are made public, and the damage is already done. Social media companies and other tech platforms need to really scale up their approach and not take hours and days to respond to these images when it comes to escalations, while looking into the kind of how their own technology is responding to this, instead of people escalating it to them and reporting these abuses on their platforms. The spread on the internet is much faster. We all know this, and I think this platforms really need to think how they can make significant investment around AI that can AI, but also human moderators who can actually detect and counter the spread of these images that target women, minorities, marginalized groups. I think the social and cultural differences in regions, which we have been saying, need to be taken into account when developing policies that regulate, AI facilitated TFGBV.
Yes, that is, you hit spot on, because it clearly, from past experiences and the things that we're seeing in the news and the developments that have been made, especially regarding generative AI, we can tell that AI is growing at a very rapid stage right now, but the laws and policies that should be implemented and put in place are not moving as fast as them, and that is a concern. We didn't have to wait for Taylor Swift to be a victim for us to actually put these things in place. That is very right. And we will move on to Dr. Leonie from the University College London, who will be sharing a presentation on Internet of Things, particularly how it's used to perpetuate TF GBV, standard setting and other forms of tracking. She will be sharing her slides in a presentation. Dr. Leonie, you have the floor.
Brilliant. I hope you can see my screen and everything.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you so much for having me. And I will be talking about a different element to the emerging harm that is lying ahead, which is not around AI and deepfakes and these types of abuses, but very often the interconnectedness of software and hardware, speaking about smart internet connected devices that really set the scene for where we're developing when it comes to physical things moving forward. And I'm here today from UCL, University College London. We are running a research group called Gender and Tech. There's a bunch of people, some of which are in the audience now, that are working on different projects that are related to technology facilitated gender-based violence, or however you want to call it. I know we have talked a lot about terminology today. And just to set the scene, we're working on this for the last years, since starting around 2018. And we're based in a computer science department, and we really focus on how basically gendered assumption molds the development of technologies, but also how the dynamics enable digital technologies to construct gender, race, and other social categories. And we do that through research, teaching, and practice. And there's several projects I could talk about, but I have been asked to talk specifically about our work on smart internet connected devices, or the so-called Internet of Things. And in the breakout groups, I could call and talk about other projects and research we're conducting if of interest. But when we look at the smart internet connected systems that we're developing, or which we already have in our home, what we have observed since our work in 2018 and moving on to now is the misuse of digital devices that are going beyond smartphones, laptops, and tablets, and all the applications that run on these systems. So while many of my previous speakers talked about like software aspects that are embedded and used through and distributed through, for example, the internet and the browser, we're talking here about physical devices that go beyond that. So for example, on this image that we've created, which we basically shared with policy actors in the UK, to emphasize that it's no longer just, you know, the smartphone, it's your smart watch, it's your doorbell, it's your thermostat, your smart internet connected camera, your television, and all the other functionalities that we have and related to connectivity are now embedded in other physical systems. And what is important to recognize when it comes to technology facilitated gender-based violence is that many of these devices are disguised. And what I mean with that is that they look like kind of conventional physical systems that we're used to, whether this is a doorbell, whether this is a kettle, they look kind of how we're used to seeing them. But what is important to recognize, especially when it comes to an abusive relationship, is that they connect to often your smartphone or other platforms, have a web application, and they look like normal devices, and people often know what they're capable of doing. The other thing is that they have enhanced capabilities. So, you know, they're often exacerbating the reach. You do not need to be physically co-present with a person to make their physical environment quite miserable. You could be entrapped by just being, you know, in Austria, but having a partner in the UK, but still being connected to those systems to basically control their behavior, monitor when they're leaving, when they're coming home, how much they're spending, for example, etc. And I think that image really tries to convey the breadth of devices. And I really want to stress this is just kind of some of the more conventional ones we're seeing, but there's far more out there that we're studying. And what I really want to stress in the context of today's symposium is many of these systems, the abuse is UI bound. And what I mean with that is, and how colleagues in Cornell and many other universities have showcased that it's not that you don't need to have profound technical capabilities to misuse devices. In fact, the systems and the functionalities we're paying for, or the average user is paying for, are deliberately misused. And that ranges from video or voice recording to the sharing of accounts, the location tracking, and again, the machine learning, the AI capabilities that are embedded into these systems. And I mean, I could talk for hours about this topic, but I'm considerate of our time. So perhaps I want to just make one important statement that perhaps leaves with you and stays with you. And one of the biggest risks I see moving forward is actually that in the environment we're currently in, both the overestimation of technical capabilities is just as dangerous as the underestimation. And what I mean with that is, for a domestic abuse victim survivor, for a stalking victim, for any person, for any vulnerable group, not knowing the capabilities and the functionalities and the ease with which, for example, surveillance or monitoring or coercion control can happen is just as dangerous as overestimating it, because in both instances, you're stifled by your inability to react, to respond, and you feel like incapable. And knowing that gender dimension and technology use are often interplaying, where women often say, you know, I'm not tech savvy, that means that they're often feeling incapable of reacting, responding, and dealing with the potential misuse of these systems and functionalities. So I really want to stress that it's important, as it was said before, around education, but really not to go down the path and route of thinking, oh my God, we're in a Black Mirror-esque and Orwellian society, without thinking actually how smart are many of these systems and how likely it is that this is taking place. Because what we're seeing is that a lot of perpetrators are often making claims that are technically not even possible. And really this dimension of over and underestimation is equally as dangerous. And I think something we should have in the back of our minds for the next 3 days, because we could end up in a huge situation of fear, because we feel like so overwhelmed by all of this and not knowing how to respond. So yeah, I leave it at that. We have actually a newsletter on this issue if you're interested. And like, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and happy to answer any questions.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Leonie. That was very, very insightful. I think I was equally fascinated as you were talking about that, because that is a lot to learn about, the abuse of IoT and all of that. Just a follow-up question before we go on to our next speaker. What do you think are the key considerations in developing, threat models to address the IoT-related risks that are associated with gender-based violence?
Yeah, I thought about this question, and there's 7 points I want to make. I know this is a lot, and perhaps I should have put them on the slides. But one of the risks around like developing threat models, and what we mean with threat models is the ability to basically consider the misuse, the abusability of certain functionalities, systems, etc., is the diversity of devices and systems. And what I mean with that is we have something that is a smart thermostat, a smart camera, a smart kettle. These are all different things, and we try to apply a coherent standard on the development, on the use. That's one problem. The second problem is that there's a software and a hardware development to this that we need to connect, which means that while in many of the examples and most of the cases people are thinking about, they're thinking of applications. So things that run on laptops, tablets, smartphones, these are applications, they are software based. But with smart internet connected devices, we have a physical thing, and so the challenge of developing threat models is both thinking about the software, but also the hardware element, which brings together computer science and engineering. The third part is the difference between safety and security. That's my go-to example. And when you think about physical things, we are often thinking about safety. If you think about a toaster, you don't want it to overheat. But when you embed software into a toaster, you're thinking about security, which is a different concept. The best example I can give is a door. For safety reasons, you want it open. For security reasons, you want it locked. And how they are often contradicting each other is in a development and a threat modeling phase a problem. The fourth one is the move away from personal devices. So nowadays, and again, that's a cultural difference here as well, but we're moving away from one device for one user to shared devices for a shared household, a shared community. And I think we haven't developed the standards to think about the fact that, are all the people capable of agreeing collectively of how we're using and whether we're installing something? And that's a challenge for the environment. The fifth problem is the standardization effort. There are activities in IEEE and many standardization bodies to talk about like smart or general like safety standards for technology facilitated gender-based violence. But I would say there needs to be more emphasis and also more drive from technology companies in there. And the sixth point is also the threat modeling problem that we're thinking always when we design things about the best case scenario. We're thinking about a happy family, We're never thinking about power indifferentials in a family setting, in a flat setting, for example, that one person has more control, has more income, has more decisive power. And I think that's a problem to navigate, again, from moving away from personal devices to shared one. And the last point, the seventh point I want to make is why it is difficult is the feature aspect. And what I mean with that is we're not, when it comes to kind of security aspect, we're thinking about the misuse from a criminal actor, right? And that person has a malicious intent. Whereas, as I mentioned earlier, in the domestic abuse and technology facilitated gender-based violence case, they're not like developing a script or something to kind of circumvent something. What they're doing is they're misusing the features people pay for. So it is hard to like iron out issues that some people deliberately purchase, like for example, parental control software, and that is being used against children, but then misuse it perhaps against their partner. And it's while we accept one, we don't accept the other. And I think that's the problem, that we're not talking here about a misuse where we have clear boundaries of what's okay and what's not, but it's the features that we as a society sometimes agree to use against certain people and other times we don't. And that's the really challenge to threat modeling here.
Thank you so much for that, Leonie. I think that was these are things that maybe we're not really conscious that we're doing or we're not doing as individuals, in fact, and it really affects how we navigate the digital technologies and the advancements that are happening every day. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure we'll delve more into it with the participants as well in the breakout rooms. Up next, we will have a video presentation by Kavya Parman from the XRSI that will be played by the tech team in the next few seconds.
Hi, I'm
perfect.
Kavya Perlman, the founder of XRSI, X Reality Safety Intelligence. I founded XRSI in 2019 with a mission to help safeguard immersive and emerging technologies. Today, I will talk about the urgent need to address the gender-based violence assisted by these very technologies that are going to become very, very common throughout our lives in the near future. I grew up in India, being far too familiar with gender-based violence. I moved to the United States in 2007 and pursued technology education. And soon after, I found myself advising Facebook for third-party security risks during 2016 US presidential election time, all the way to then moving on to safeguarding the virtual worlds of Second Life. It's the oldest existing virtual world and prototypical metaverse. And all of these experiences taught me the deep impact technology can have on human lives. The mission to safeguard technologies became very personal to me, and especially talk about violence as I was navigating through domestic violence myself. Part of this domestic violence subject actually was highly influenced by virtual reality, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I really want to highlight a few points. There is little time, so I prepared a few slides that I want to share with you about the actual risks that virtual reality and these immersive technologies can bring about. So let's talk about these risks. These are very, these subjects are very vast, but I'm highlighting just some of the major ones, such as anonymity and immersion. A perpetrator can mask their identity and, cause all kinds of expose women or cause doxing, do all kinds of harassment, etc. There is a very real threat about non-consensual imagery being shared. In fact, some of these devices, such as these augmented reality type devices, they have cameras on both sides. This is a smart glass, but soon enough, we will, in fact, augmented reality glasses are coming for us. And on the other side, this is Meta Quest 3 from Facebook, and it also has multiple sensors and cameras. So it allows you to, record the surroundings at any given time, and that could really lead to a lot of data disclosure. In fact, recording women non-consensually. Data privacy and security, because of the sensors all that are in these devices. Lots of data and privacy security issues can arise, especially inferred data. We call it biometrically inferred data, where just by the movement of your hands, etc., a lot more data can be collected about a particular person. And that could also lead to all kinds of other security and privacy issues. The one that, I personally endured through domestic violence was the isolation and neglect. You can't imagine the impact that it may have when a person is actually using virtual reality to isolate the other partner. And this is something that I, had to endure firsthand. So certainly, these are some of the risks that, specifically women do have to worry about, and also gender diverse communities have to worry about. Now, these risks do have real world implications. In fact, to the point of, weaponizing these technologies, such as these technologies can be used for manipulation and control and abuse. In 2016, Stanford research suggests that, Cambridge Analytica had about 5,000 data points on each Americans. Whereas in virtual reality, you can have over 2 million data points collected in just about less than 20 minutes. So think about that disparity and the large amount of data that now is being collected. Now that data could be fed into artificial intelligence systems to generate videos around, or deep fakes around people's, personas, etc. So these are, technologies that allow so much of data collection, and then apparently combined with other technologies that artificial intelligence, etc., it could really lead to weaponizing it against certain demographics, against some people. And it does have a deep psychological impact. We know that, immersion can feel so close, so real in virtual reality, as if the actual experience is actually happening, as if it's real life. So that's why it is really, really important that we pay attention to these technologies and the impact that it may have, especially on gender diverse communities. So what can we do to build safety? I'm highlighting here some of the points, but of course, there are several resources available at XRSI website. I encourage you to download some of those reports, as well as, contact us in case you want to learn more about this. But starting with, reporting and moderation, a solid, robust platform, abuse reporting system, it's really important for platforms to have. People should be made aware of digital rights education. We absolutely need legal frameworks. In fact, eSafety Commissioner was the first global government body that put out immersive technology statement around augmented virtual reality, all these technologies, and talked about what is important specifically to their demographics, to the constituents, including minorities, etc. So this is something that we encourage all governments and other stakeholders to follow suit and really think about how we are going to safeguard minorities, women, gender diverse communities, vulnerable population in general. For platforms, there needs to be community standards, technical safeguards, such as, when you are in virtual reality and everything is, kind of feels very real, there could be safety bubbles that could be created. And that should be really by default. So those kinds of technical safeguards are up to the platforms to create for safeguarding folks in virtual reality. We definitely need collaborative efforts where all stakeholders come together to bring about a collaborative shared responsibility, where they share the responsibility between, let's say, if it's the person who has a responsibility to be aware of the risks and make good choices with respect to choosing a good platform, etc., or activating some of the safeguards.
Mariam, back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I thought that the video wasn't ended. It was probably a glitch at the technical end. Thank you very much for that, for the video. Unfortunately, we don't have Kavia present here with us today, but we do have members of our team who will be joining us during the breakout rooms, and we're hoping to talk more about what she talked about in the presentation, talk about how stakeholders can proactively address these challenges, and maybe talk more about best practices for promoting inclusivity and safety for virtual reality spaces. And before now, it appears that we've reached our final speaker for this panel, who is Erica Olson from the Safety Net Project and Stop Stalkerware Coalition, who will also be making a presentation on her topic. Erica, you have the floor. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Olson, and I'm the Senior Director of the Safety Net Project at the National Network to End Domestic Violence in the United States. Safety Net was founded over 20 years ago to focus on the intersection of technology and safety as it relates to survivors of abuse. We provide training and assistance to programs working with survivors and trauma-informed guidance to companies. I do want to clarify here, are you sharing the slides on your end? There we go. I think, yes, thank you.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
Thank you. I thought so. Thank you. We can move to the next one, please. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So every few years, we try to do an assessment of the field to hear what the technology-related concerns are. In December of 2020 and January of 2021, we surveyed victim service providers and legal system professionals in the US to learn about what they were seeing in their work with survivors. Consistent with previous assessments, the data showed that the vast majority of professionals, 97%, were seeing technology abuse come up as a consistent concern. The responses also indicated that the most common types of tech abuse were harassment, limiting access of technology, which can mean breaking or shutting off devices, and surveillance, which we'll talk more about. Next slide, thank you. The needs assessment also identified phones, social media, and messaging as the technologies most commonly misused. IoT devices, which you've heard about, location trackers, and other emerging technologies were reported to be increasingly seen in cases. It also pointed to the digital divide, a term that describes the gap in technology access as a barrier for survivors in receiving services and support. Next slide. Thank you. As I mentioned, surveillance was identified as one of the most common forms of tech abuse. Now, surveillance can include, it's pretty a large bucket. So it can include tracking location, monitoring online accounts such as social media, financial accounts, email. It can include the use of cameras or eavesdropping devices to watch or listen in without knowledge or consent. Or it could include monitoring a person's actual device, which could then incorporate everything I already mentioned. Our primary device is often our phones, the thing we carry with us and use constantly to log into various accounts, take pictures of all the details of our lives, get us from point A to point B, communicate with the world. They store a ton of information about us, and unauthorized access to our phones is a privacy violation and can be a very impactful and traumatizing tactic of abuse. Because of that, I'm just going to take a moment to focus on stalkerware. Next slide, please. Thank you. So stalkerware is not a new concern. We have been discussing this issue of stalkerware for a decade now. And in 2019, we were one of the founding members of the Coalition Against Stalkerware, a global group of companies and nonprofits who share information in order to best address this particular tactic of abuse. Stalkerware is software that allows the person who installed it to spy on everything that happens on that device without any notification to the user. Next slide, please. Thank you. So stalkerware typically requires physical access to the device to install it, but once it's set up, the person can remotely monitor everything that is happening on that device, including phone calls, browser activity, and app activity, as well as location. The main concern here is the stealth operating mode. Many people choose to consensually share their location with a partner, and there are also various types of parental monitoring apps, but with most of those, both devices can clearly show that the app is downloaded and running. The ability for stalkerware to operate without any notification at all to the user and to be hidden on the phone so it's difficult to detect and remove makes it a pretty invasive and problematic tool for survivors. But stalkerware is just one tool of many that is used to monitor and control someone. Next slide, please. Thank you. Many of our everyday technologies can also be misused as a tactic of harassment, financial abuse, isolation, emotional abuse, stalking, instilling fear, and physical abuse. Other technologies that we are seeing misused include smart home devices, home security systems, connected cars, and various online spaces. There are also many other ways that our phones can be monitored, especially when there's ongoing access to the device and the connected accounts. Although stalkerware is an incredibly concerning issue, most misuse is in the less technological forms, such as an abusive person consistently looking through the partner's phone or coercing access. The everyday tech is also a concern because what we are talking about here, what everyone is talking about, are old behaviors with new tools. Behind the technology is the same power and control dynamics. Abusers will take advantage of available tools to further their abuse. What we have seen over the years is that technologies become integrated into, as technologies become integrated into our everyday lives as part of how we communicate and navigate the world. And the more that they are affordable and accessible, then the more that they will be misused and woven throughout tactics of abuse. This means that there will always be some sort of new tactic and new concern placing a significant burden on both survivors and professionals who are working with them to stay informed and on top of the technology. Next slide, please. Thank you. That all sounds pretty depressing after everything we've heard today. But I do want to say that we are just touching the surface on this conversation. There is so much to say about the strategic and empowered use of technology by survivors and the creative use of tech for good. There are many resources available to provide more information on tech abuse and tech safety, including on our site and those of our sister projects. I hope I can answer any questions and be available for assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Erica. And yes, you kind of did close off when you mentioned about the whole, as technology is being accessible and everyone is using for everyday use. And now it's going to make it very more vulnerable for victims and survivors. It's going to make them more vulnerable to, their perpetrators. But I'm sure that is something we can delve into more into the breakout rooms. I believe that that brings us to the end of this panel. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to extend my gratitude to all our esteemed panelists whose expertise and dedication have really enriched our discussion. The insights that they shared and their perspectives in terms of generative AI, Internet of Things, law and policy, as well as, collaboration between stakeholders, have really illuminated the very multifaceted nature of technology and technology-facilitated gender-based violence. I believe it's right to say that it has also underscored the urgency of our collective action. I think we can all agree that from this conversation that we started on a good momentum for the symposium today, calling us, and it's also calling us to be very steadfast in our commitment to advancing survivor-centric approaches and promote digital inclusion, harness the transformative power of technology for positive change. Thank you so much. Alex, back to you.
Thank you so much, Mariam. And again, I reiterate your thanks to such a fantastic panel and for everyone for taking the time to be with us this morning. We're going to now move on to the second panel, which is called Business Models for Technology. And in this panel, we're being supported by Amanda Manyame, who is a digital law and rights advisor at Equality Now, and she provides legal expertise for Equality Now's campaigns to end tech-facilitated GBV. Amanda, I will turn over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. It was very interesting listening to the previous panel. Now we're going to dive deeper into some of the underpinning structural challenges and contributing factors to TFGBV. As we have already heard, TFGBV is part of the historic patterns of gender-based violence, which is itself rooted in the same system of misogyny and power imbalances that perpetuates the subordination of marginalized groups of people in society. What is new is the technology, which has created the opportunity for amplification of TFGBV. As we discuss the challenges and opportunities to address TFGBV, it is important to particularly focus on the engagement or data-driven business model of tech companies and ad tech. The brilliant speakers on this panel will provide insight into related data topics such as the Afrofeminist Data Governance Project, surveillance and safety, the business models of AI, all of which will help us to better understand some of the issues with data governance and gender-based violence programming. Kicking off the discussion is Mara Fatafta, who is the MENA Policy and Advocacy Director at Access Now. You're going to be talking to us really generally, giving an overview on the business model. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and hi everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be with you today. Indeed, okay, so I wanted to focus on a very specific phenomena that we see that has come into focus in recent years, and it's particularly threatening to women and other gender minorities. So, when we discuss the business model of tech companies, we often immediately think of social media platforms, and rightly so. Women defenders and the broader women's rights and feminist movements rely on digital platforms and services, turning those privately owned and ruled and operated commercial platforms into spaces of engagement and exposure. And with that exposure comes a plethora of digital security challenges and threats. It's mostly on social media spaces and messaging apps where we witness and also experience those as women, in addition to non-binary genders, different forms of gender-based violence, from doxing, disinformation, hate speech, harassment. There is really a long list of threats that we will delve into today. But a growing number of our clients to Access Now, and by way of introduction, I haven't mentioned, Access Now is at grassroots the global digital rights organization, and our mission is to defend and extend the rights of people and communities at risk. And so we run a digital security helpline available around the clock for individuals that face cyber and digital threats. And among those are obviously women and other gender minorities that experience different forms of gender-based violence. And one reoccurring reports that come to us and some of the concerns is the use of invasive spyware and targeted surveillance technologies. 3 weeks ago, actually, we published a damning investigation that reveals the weaponization and the use of spyware to attack and infiltrate civil society in Jordan, where over 35 individuals, including women, from journalists to human rights lawyers to activists, even civil society members, have been hacked or targeted. And this form of unlawful and disproportionate use of targeted digital surveillance have increasingly, as I said, come into focus, and it shed light on its impact and its violations of an individual's rights, including the right to privacy, the right to freedom of expression, the right to association and peaceful assembly. And here, the impact of targeted surveillance on women is particularly grievous, given the societies, the patriarchal societies we live in, the political, the societal, and the gender power asymmetries. And that's something for me as a woman human rights defender and someone that works on digital rights. I have often asked myself what would be the threat of having my individual, my personal devices hacked. And that made me think about shedding light on the experience of women when they are targeted, which is, as I said, more grievous and far more destructive to a woman's life and career. And there are few things to shed light on here. And one is that the the surveillance or the targeted surveillance or the use of spyware is not only a violation of a woman's privacy, but it can also trigger and activate other serious threats. It often grants authorities or the malicious actors responsible for the hacking other opportunities to weaponize the information they extract from women's devices, whether it be smear campaigns, blackmail, extortion, doxing. And in our societies, publishing the private information or intimate photos and conversations of women online can be, a literal or even a professional death sentence. We've heard multiple reports of women, or especially girls, being killed as a result of sharing intimate photos of themselves on social media. There are also examples of where high-profile women who are active in the public life have their medical records or intimate photos shared without their consent on social media in order to discredit and legitimize them. So one example that comes to mind that we have worked on is the sharing of medical records of Tunisian women judges who, after they were dismissed from their jobs by the president a couple of years ago, they had virginity tests published on Facebook by actors affiliated with the regime in order to show them as morally corrupt women, and therefore not fit for the job being women judges. That's just one example of many that we deal with, and that again come from the extraction of personal information and the doxing on social media. And a second factor or aspect to digital surveillance and the use of spyware and how it is life-altering and damaging experience for women is the absence of robust and gender-sensitive legal, societal, psychological protection mechanisms. So, if I get hacked or any one of us gets hacked, our public or private information shared publicly, where do you go to? Where do you seek redress? And how can you get support, whether it be from the platforms, whether it be from the police, or even through judicial mechanisms to seek redress? Often when women can, and when it comes to spyware or the use of surveillance, given its shady nature, that's even much more difficult. And so talking to women who have been targeted and hacked, we learned from them how they live in the sphere of how potentially my information can be shared, if not now, maybe later. And one of the expressions that got stuck with me is that this hacking or the targeted surveillance is a bit of like a ticking bomb. So that a malicious actor has access to every aspect of your life, and maybe won't share it now, but might share it in the future. And you live in this perpetual cycle of fear, not knowing when your personal information could be weaponized against you. And it has also led to professional and social isolation of women targets, particularly when we talk about women journalists who need to protect their sources, or women human rights defenders that deal with marginalized and extremely vulnerable communities, whether abused women or other abused women human rights defenders. And the examples or the impact of targeted surveillance can be, again, very life-altering, to the point that one of the women I spoke to said that she cannot even feel safe within the vicinity of her own home or with her family. She's a Muslim, so she has to wear her veil even inside of her home because she feels that her own privacy is violated. We've also seen examples where, carrying your phone with you has become an extension almost of our bodies. And so some women are afraid of, once they're hacked, they're afraid to walk on the street. They're always afraid that there is someone following them and that might physically attack them. And so would alternate or use a different route when they need to go to work or visit a friend. And to quote one of the women who said to us once she was hacked that home was not safe anymore for her. Personal freedoms are over for me. They no longer exist. I'm not safe at home, on the street, or anywhere. And that's a statement that has resonated talking to women who have been abused through the use of spyware technologies. And here I want to go back to the business model of social media platforms to make a full circle to where I started. Once a woman is hacked or have been targeted with unlawful targeted surveillance, we see the exacerbation of that on social media. So, and there are, the issues here are multifold. One, we see the business models of social media companies prioritize again and again driving engagement for profit, irrespective of the harms and the violence inflicted on individuals and communities. The second issue, we see context void, content moderation rules and enforcement. So for instance, we have escalated cases to social media companies of doxed women who would usually wear hijab, but malicious actors have shared their pictures without the veil. And when you escalate those cases to social media, they say, well, that there's nothing wrong with a photo, of a beautiful woman who is sitting on a chair, smiling. But again, when you put that in the context of where and how and what the potential impact might be, and as I said, in some cases, it is life-threatening. Sadly, the response is often slow. And that leads me to my third point, in terms of the business model, and that is the lack of rapid and transparent reporting mechanisms that enable women themselves to escalate cases to social media platforms when there is a situation of doxing or hate speech or harassment. So, again, people often revert to organized civil society organizations like Access Now to seek redress. That can take hours, but it can also take days, and often the damage is already done, and the photos and the conversations have migrated from one platform to the other, as often is the nature of these coordinated attacks and smear campaigns. So the question here is that what can we do? I think we need to take a holistic approach to when we think about the business model. So we need to expand and think what are the technologies that we are discussing here. So there are these technologies that we all use, but there are pernicious technologies that should be banned and that demand our attention and also demand a collective response. And here we have been advocating for targeted surveillance to be seen as a form of gender-based violence when women are the victim, and that spyware, such as Pegasus spyware or others, should be banned, and there should be a lot of effort and advocacy put with regards to governments, but also the technologies and the investors that allow for the use and the proliferation of commercial spyware that have a devastating impact on women. There is a further need for research to understand more about the nature, but also the types of technologies, surveillance technologies that are used and weaponized to target women, and particularly those who are active in public life. And finally, we need to think about redress mechanisms that understand this, the transnational nature of spyware, its impact beyond just hacking a device, hacking an individual, and violating their privacy, and understanding how this can develop into a concerted or a coordinated online attack that involves doxing and hate speech. We need to think of offline and online remedies that come together. So women need psychological support. They need gender-sensitive support, societal protection in some cases, as well as legal mechanisms to ensure that the perpetrators are brought to justice and the women are protected now in the future. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I'll hand it back to you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Mara, for that. Thank you for highlighting how targeted digital surveillance impacts on human rights, such as the right to privacy and civic participation, as well as the importance of context-specific online content moderation, which is very, very key, and also some of the challenges around the lack of transparent and responsive reporting mechanisms that are on the digital platforms that many of us use, that we're using now. Now I would like to pass on the baton to hear from Rachel Magwegwe, who is a lawyer and project manager at Policy. She's going to be talking to us about the Afrofeminist Data Governance Project. The floor is yours, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have a very brief presentation and just a small correction. I am not the project manager. I do lead on the data governance work at Policy, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you. Lovely greetings from Tanzania. That is where I am based, Tanzania in East Africa. So I'm going to be using very few minutes to talk to you about the Afrofeminist Data Governance Project. And we have recently finalized our findings and our reports, and this is what I'm going to be sharing with you as we talk about business models and technology-facilitated gender-based violence. In the next slide, as we go and look, you will see the work that we have done. Our target countries, if we can go to the next slide. So this is just a little background. Our target countries were Ghana, Ivory Coast, so that's West Africa, Ivory Coast, which is the Francophone speaking country, and then we did East Africa, Kenya, and then Southern Africa, Zambia. So these are a few pictures of some of the stakeholders we met. We met people from government, lawyers, tech experts, media practitioners, people working in civil society organizations, people from ministries of finance and ICT. And in the next picture as well, these are our stakeholders, people from data protection authorities, data protection commissions, also in Zambia and Kenya. And when we go to the next slide, we're happy to show you some of our findings. Our project was looking at how data governance frameworks can be inclusive by design. So we did a lot of desktop research, just compiling different laws, different policies, different frameworks, and we also held some key informant interviews. I am happy to share these links with all of you after we finish this panel, and so that you can interact with us more. And then when we go to the next slide, you will also see that there is a big challenge, as we know, when it comes to implementation, when it comes to data governance frameworks, because they're already made with one perception in mind already. And so this was what one of our respondents told us in the interview. And they said, and from the few policies that we laid hands on, we realized that there was little or nothing about disaggregation of data by sex. And that makes it difficult because, for instance, if you have a policy that doesn't have this disaggregation, when you're monitoring or measuring access, how do you effectively do that? How can we tell that you've been able to empower as many males as you have done with females? There's no data in to help in doing assessments. So this was one of our key informant interviews. And to the next slide, if we can go there as well. You will see that we had some very interesting insights and findings. So more tracking of the evolution and development of countries' data and digital economy. A lot of our stakeholders told us that not enough tracking, not enough updating is being done, and that should be done. For instance, Ghana, which we are so proud that we got to work with, has a data protection law that dates back to 2012. And so when we met with our different stakeholders, they told us this law needs to be updated. What was happening in 2012 isn't happening now. But we do celebrate Ghana because at the time, the Data Protection Commissioner, who was one of our stakeholders, really worked so hard to establish this commission and to establish this law. But there is a need to update that as well. We were also able to find out more about how patriarchal views of gender data are still present and hold a very narrow lens when it comes to gender data. A word such as doctor, just because of that normative view, is just viewed as a male. whereas it can be both male and female. And so one of our other insights was the need for governments to have multidisciplinary independent working groups on data governance. We talked a lot about this in the fact that when many people hear the word data protection, data governance, technology governance, they mostly quickly run to the digital space, they run to the computer laws, the cybercrime laws, but then it really pushed us to think more about all the different sectors of life that are connected to technology and to digital and data. If you're talking about health, if you're talking about children and family, the education laws, the education sector, election laws, and frameworks like that. If you're talking about investment laws, all of these different aspects are all combined and they all come together when we talk about data governance. And we still see a challenge in addressing gender data into all these different sectors. As I'm wrapping up, please take me to my next slide, where this is another quote from one of our respondents who said that I worry that technologies are ever advancing, but our data governance structures are not. So it's like we're getting started, we're trying to catch up. So that was something that one of our respondents told us. And to my next slide. These are just some of the few recommendations that we wrote in our reports, and we will be sharing those with you all as well if anybody would like to read more. So there needs to be concerted efforts that are aiming to develop the state's national capacities to collect, compile, and disseminate gender statistics. Those really need to be prioritized, because even when you look at that, it will really help with the gender responsive budgeting, which was one of our recommendations. Having those data, having the statistics will definitely help into these other components of society. And also one of our recommendations in our paper is the adoption of feminist research methodologies which can embrace intersectionality. So there is still need for capacitation, still need into looking to build up the skills for people working into research sectors and the research methodologies of all these different sectors in our governments and in our countries. And the last two, anti-oppressive design thinking. So this all goes back to design. This all goes back to the normative, the patriarchal views of design. And then lastly, local knowledge, scholarship, and production. So investing in what the local entities already know about gender data, investing in that and producing it as much as possible. And to my I believe this should be my last slide, if you can take me there. This has been wonderful. I wish I had more time, but please do follow our pages. This is uspolicy.org. We're on Facebook and Twitter, but we also did this project with My Data Rights Africa. It was a collaboration. It was wonderful. We are so excited. We have so much to tell you all and share with you all, and we hope to keep interacting. Please be on the lookout on our pages for more of this information. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rachel. The continuum of life online and offline. I think we sometimes forget that we are one person. Your virtual identity as well as your physical identity are connected. So also your research highlighting a key missing feature is gender disaggregated data. I think that was one of the key highlights that I picked up from your presentation, and also the importance of inclusive data governance frameworks by design. That was very, very key. Thank you so much for your presentation. Next to take the floor will be Lucy Perdon, who's the director for Courage Everywhere, and she'll be speaking on EdTech. Over to you, Lucy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda. And thank you so much to UNFPA for having me. Yes, my name's Lucy. I'm the director of Courage Everywhere. It's a space focused on gender justice policy and innovation to advance technology for all women. And I'm lucky enough to have worked on tech and human rights for over a decade. And I've spent a number of these years challenging the digital advertising industry, which has become extractive and exploitive in the way that it's an easy avenue to collect a lot of data and make it available. And this has a particular impact on women. So in case you're not familiar, ad tech is a catch-all term that describes the tools used to target, deliver, and measure the performance of digital advertising, which for the most part involves collecting a lot of personal data from a lot of different sources. And also I'll be talking a bit about data brokers, and these are companies that collect, buy and sell data in order to profile you, target you with adverts, sell to credit reference agencies, insurance companies, etc. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I've been asked to focus on a project I did last year when I was a senior tech policy fellow at Mozilla, which is the organization that makes the Firefox browser. Now, this project was looking at incorporating a gender perspective into digital advertising reform in the EU and the UK, with the goal of achieving better protections for women's health data. And for this, I really engaged with the femtech industry. So this is a growing area of digital health that specifically focuses on women's health-related topics. Period and fertility trackers being probably the most well-known example of this technology, and they deal with a lot of sensitive data. So this was really, inspired by a feminist research methodology and data feminism. The studies broadly about the impact of the misuse of women's personal data enabled by the business model of ad tech, and there are links to this, I believe, in the resource document. Next slide, please. So how does this work? What is this business model? So advertising is the lifeblood of the internet, and this allows us to access a wide range of services for free, but not really for free. It's in exchange for our attention and our data. And monetizing data for advertising really is the dominant business model of the internet. So for us as internet users, the reality is that going online does mean being tracked for advertising by a lot of different companies. And there are really layers of complexity when it comes to extracting personal data at a technical level. For this purpose, through online trackers such as cookies and pixels, but also analytics tools, software development kits, it's really quite hard to avoid. And women's data is valuable. From an advertising perspective, women have these life milestones and brand capture moments, such as menstruating and having a baby, where if a brand can get in there and get you to use this product, you will probably use it for a really long time. So essentially, we are talking about a form of surveillance. And women throughout time have always been watched, as a method of oppression and control. And as we know, because of this symposium today, with technology, it's never been easier to surveil women. Next slide, please. So some of the harms of ad tech and the digital advertising industry, because women experience more moments of vulnerability in their health journeys, such as menstruation, pregnancy, fertility treatment, giving birth, managing the menopause, and women also rely on the internet for health information and advice, we really need to ensure that these moments do not lead to data exploitation, because I really do believe that maintaining control over personal and intimate information is paramount for women's safety, particularly in situations where they are temporarily vulnerable. And this can be harmful in many ways, but a couple of examples. The impact of being targeted with adverts for unwanted pregnancy products after suffering a miscarriage. This can have a real negative impact on a woman's mental health. On an individual level, this type of targeting can cause feelings of shame and grief. And on a societal level, it's really reinforcing the stigma and taboo around the discussion of miscarriage, and that are already kind of quite deep-rooted in society. And as consumers, we're targeted with harmful beauty products and health products all the time. So some scenarios are, targeting slimming aids to women who've just given birth, or really targeting unnecessary products and treatments at women who are really desperate to conceive or manage the menopause. Next slide, please. And, really what we've been looking at today is this weaponization of data. So increasingly women experiencing their intimate data being weaponized against them in a number of ways. So a few examples here. I think the overturning of Roe v. Wade in the US was a real light bulb moment for many on the real life implications of intimate data collection on a woman's safety and surveillance that's possible. So after Roe v. Wade was overturned, there were so many reports about women deleting their menstruation apps, even avoiding Google, in fear of information being weaponized against them and prosecute them for having an abortion. But personal information that's easy to access also puts domestic violence survivors at greater risk, and perpetrators weaponize information for abuse in this area as well. So, for example, in 2023, women's groups in the UK published a joint letter urging women in abusive or coercive relationships to delete the NHS app, which is the National Health Service app that grants remote access to medical records. And the specific concern was that an abusive spouse might use this information to undermine legal cases of custody, of dependence, or even find out about the use of contraception that's kind of forbidden in the relationship or the home. So this is all kind of adding up that we really need to make sure that sources of intimate information are not readily available. And the real worst case scenario where this can happen is the horrific example of Amy Boyer in the US, who was killed in October 1999 by a man stalking her after he purchased her information from a data broker and was able to track her down that way. Next slide, please. So just some recommendations to finish up around ad tech. We really need more gender-focused research on these harms. It's, there are a lot of studies around public awareness of data collection, but I feel like there's not that many with a gender focus. And there is clearly a need to listen more to women's concerns around data collection and sharing, because as I've heard so many times, which I love, like what gets measured can be addressed. And women will respond when asked. In the UK, there was a consultation to inform the Women's Health Strategy, and 100,000 women responded to this. So there is definitely women will take part. Also, gender mainstreaming digital policy. Gender mainstreaming is not a new concept in policy making, of course, but I really feel like it's lacking in a lot of tech policy, and it really shows in the design and the decision making across the sector. We also need it easier for women to access and withhold their information. This is a very opaque ecosystem of digital advertising. It's very hard for you to know what companies have your information and what they use it for. So this expectation and responsibility weighted against the individual to manage their own privacy online is kind of impossible to do comprehensively. And, in combating technology-facilitated gender-based violence, we've got these kind of individual tools developed by social media companies, which are not a replacement for a strategy on how to protect women from harm, or ignoring like basic, design considerations in the products. And really what we need is reforming the digital advertising industry completely. There's a very core problem with the business model of monetizing data, but it's so hard to move the dial on this issue policy-wise, even though it's an open secret how bad the industry is. And I think that's because it's very technically complex. It can be hard to produce evidence of harm connected with advertising that policymakers kind of find satisfying enough to make changes, because this is a multi-billion-dollar industry that employs a lot of people. There's a very strong industry lobby, and reform is kind of against the interests of a lot of tech companies. So we really need to kind of encourage and test alternative advertising models that rely less on the collection of personal data and reduce its value. And I do feel like this is the direction of travel. We're seeing a lot more privacy enhancing technology, other products out there, but because it's quite complex, it's taking quite a lot of time. And also I have to finish with saying that we need to invest in more women-owned business and owned businesses and founders, because tech is still a very male dominated industry, and only a fraction of investment goes to companies with women founders. So the British Business Bank reported that out of every £1 of venture capital investment, all women founder teams in the UK get less than 1 pence. So really investing in these women founders and women-led businesses should really be central to implementing a lot of strategies around women's health, digital advertising models, and also the future of AI. That's it for me. Next slide, just with my contact details. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to the sessions later on, and all the speakers so far have been absolutely amazing. I'm completely in awe of you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lucy. I believe we all knew that going online is not for free. We pay for it with our data. But for women, it is particularly vulnerable because we pay for it usually with our health data and data that is very intimate for us. And that opens us up to being targeted with harmful products and information as well. And thank you so much again for those recommendations. And I think key is, the need to focus on gender-focused research. And I like what you said at the end there. What is measured can be addressed. I like that. Now we're going to move on to our next speaker, Maha Ashwini, who is the AI country researcher for Global Index on Responsible AI. She'll be speaking on business models on AI and how these might be addressed. Over to you, Maha.
Maha. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for your kind invitation. My name is Maha Jouini. I'm based in Senegal, where I work as an AI policy researcher. My presentation today will focus on AI policy in Africa. I mean, in the country where they have already launched AI policy. I will refer to the case of Senegal, where I work, and Tunisia, where I do come from. First of all, I would love to give a global overview of African women in tech industry. For example, Tunisia as a model where women are highly educated, and also we are considered as second in the world in terms of percentage of female graduated in sciences, technology, engineering, and mathematics, with 58% on scientific field. The number of male graduates in this field exceeded that of women in 107 countries, according to UNESCO data, which highlighted an increase in the unemployment of rate of women with higher education, despite of the whole efforts made. And this phenomenon of having an employment high rate of women in the field of tech, it is really wide in the world. Also, in the case of Senegal, they were studied by the National Employers Council, CNP, on professional diversity made public. There were only 50% of the companies have at least 50% women in their workforce. Nearly a third of companies have a percentage of women in their workforce, between 10–30%. This issue focuses on professional diversity and women's access to senior corporate governance body. And this problem is not only on Senegal, where women, they are less represented in the tech workforce. And in case of Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, we are, as I said, we are facing this phenomenon of unemployment among the women who are highly educated. Like, for example, in Tunisia, I'm graduated in applied technology. I studied in China. When I graduate, I came back to Tunisia. It was hard for me to get a high position, a senior position in companies, and most of the workforce was tempted me to go and do the digital marketing. In the workforce in Africa and in Arab world, there are kind of lack of trust in women in this field. Also, there are other reports led by UNESCO indicates that only 30% of tech professionals in Africa are female, and female only captured 7% of funding, comparing to 93% of men. While their presence in African digital technologies simulates innovation and promotes a greater competitive that underpins industrializations. Regarding AI policy and gender inclusion, according to my work, actually there are no any explicit mention to gender in AI policies. Case of Tunisia, our AI national policy were more focused on l'industrie 4.0, the fourth revolutionary industry. So the AI policy was more focused on implementing AI in private sectors and to innovate more and industry, plus some recommendations on promoting women entrepreneurship, promoting women in data sciences, which they call it la gouvernance en IA et données, AI governance and data. However, even on the laws regarding the data protection, there were not explicit call or policy regarding protecting women. And in Tunisia, we have many cases where women were harassed, humiliated, cause of misuse of their data, and we don't have any clear law, and also we don't have social assistance in case of reporting online violations. Well, in Tunisia, they recommend the charte éthique pour une IA responsable, AI charter for responsible use. And we don't, I didn't notice any concern on the impact of foundation models, generative AI, on women's rights and women's life. There are not any kind of efforts on this. As well as in case in Egypt, they have already launched last November, they launched the Egyptian Charter for AI Responsible Use, and there were not any explicit and clear statement regarding the impact of AI on women's life. Case in Senegal, Senegal have launched also the National Data Governance Strategy, and there are no clear also laws or aspirations regarding data and gender. Actually, in the AI national policy in Senegal, there are three recommendations. First, strengthening and multiply skills of women in data sciences. Second, establish a regulatory body for emerging technology, particularly AI, with reference to international good practices and dismission and skills in the legal science and in human resources, method of appointments, made of operation, and so on. The action, the 6.8, it calls to establish a national ethics and multidisciplinary advisory committee where there are civil society, consumers, public and private organizations to work on AI ethical use and make sure that AI is used for the well human being. But as I said, there are no any explicit mentions for women rights. However, Windhoek's statement on artificial intelligence in Southern Africa, launched 9 September 2022, it has three major recommendations on gender and AI, gender and data. Firstly, in the part of infrastructure and investment, they call for support the development and implementation of gender responsive policies and programs, including programs that enhance girls and women participations in STEAM, encourage female entrepreneurship, leadership and management in industries, as it guided by the Charter of SADC Women in Sciences and Engineering and Technology. Second, promote the generation and use of data sets that reflects diversity and promote gender inclusion, establish a support facilitated by civil societies organization, and network to connect and empower women around the world, such as the Global Network of Women of Ethics of AI. Third one, expand investments toward infrastructure development to address issues with such access to electricity, connectivity, data centers, and so on. another problem, apart of the lack of policies and doctrines which highlight the impact of AI in women's lives, and also lack of national policies to encourage female entrepreneurship, because I read a lot of papers and policy papers about encouraging female entrepreneurship, but in the end of the day, there are any depth or funding goes for women in this field. And in Tunisia, we have a social phenomenon. We call it in Arabic تأنيث الفقر. In French, la féminisation de la pauvreté, and we translate it to English in feminization of poverty, where the poverty is in correlation with gender. According to Wikigender, we define feminization of poverty as an increase of the difference of levels of poverty among women and men, or female versus male, or couple-headed household. It can also mean an increase in the role gender inequalities play as a determinant of poverty, which also characterizes feminizations of causes of poverty. Actually, in Africa, the feminization of poverty is one of the challenges which women is facing on the tech industry. To lead a company, or to educate in, or to empower yourself, or educate yourself in the field of data sciences or AI, it requires money. It requires financement. And unfortunately, we are in context where women are more poor. We don't have access to loans. We don't have access to work. For example, in Tunisia, in 2020, there are a report launched by Banque Mondiale said that the female unemployment in the country is 2.8%, which almost 10% over that of men. The percentage is higher in rural areas. Unemployment of women occurs due to many factors. Available jobs are not commensurate with the increased number of young women, educated women, and those who marry at later age. And Tunisia is not the only countries, because also in the rest of the continent and in the global South, African in the tech sectors face substantial challenges. As I said, the limited access to quality STEM educations. Also, there we have other issue, which is the lack of statistics about women in tech. For example, I was trying to do a research on women and internet access in Congo, Burundi. I didn't get any information. As well as in Mali, in Chad, in many African countries, we don't have data about how many women can have access to the internet, how many women can benefit from fintech, and so on. Also, there are limited access to banking loans, limited access to higher level position. For example, till now in Tunisia, there are no women can lead la Banque Centrale, central bank. No way. In the banking system, no woman can cross higher senior level. It's clear also with the Association of Businessmen in Ministry of Defense and Interior Ministry. There are positions, high-level positions in certain fields. They are dedicated only for men. Which explain why now, why the number of women worldwide in the field of tech industry are less. For example, according to a study led by UNESCO, it says that the percentage of women in AI research are 12%, The percentage of women who are working as a software developer are 6%. The percentage of women in technical roles in major ML companies are 20%. And this is explained why artificial intelligence is a discipline founded and studied for decades, almost exclusively by men. It's being a human construct. It's socially and culturally conditioned. And in AI disciplines, we notice a notable gender gap exists in the work itself, with its imbalance similarity reflected in both job acquisitions and retention for women in STEM role. Recommendations to end. First of all, create an enabling environment for girls and women, establish direct partnership with local communities, traditional leaders to discuss the importance of girls' education as a factor for peace and locomotive for development. Also advancing African value system and principle in AI ethics, such Windhoek statement on AI and Maputo protocol. Also in schools, in engineering schools, indeed, we have to address the issues of gender-based violence through legal and policy framework, implementing measures to combat discriminatory institutions and social attitudes and practices. We need to create safe and affordable school environments. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Maha, for that very informative presentation, which also linked back to what Rachel and Lucy were talking about the lack of gender disaggregated data. It's also interesting that you raised that although everyone mentions we need to have more women working in tech, more women working in AI, but then there's also this societal lack of trust in women, which also results in women then going to get a degree in a technological field, but they're not getting the job to do the work. So that is also something that then needs to be addressed from a policy perspective. I will now pass on to Abdul Hakim Ajijola, who sits on the African Union Cybersecurity Experts Group, and he will be speaking on surveillance and safety. Over to you, Abdul.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Okay. If you permit me, I'd just like to follow up on what some of the previous speakers have said, just as they come into my mind. First of all, to follow up on the Tunisian examples by Marwan, which are very sad because there are specific prohibitions in Islam against spying by anyone, and very, very specific prohibitions on publishing, for example, the female judge's medical records, which one would argue is tantamount to backbiting. And this raises a whole set of theological, technology-related issues for another debate, but I just wanted to put them on the table. To build on Lucy's intervention, I would agree that it's in our society's self-interest to optimize or to optimally leverage 50% of our population, our women. And to that end, we definitely need more women founders and innovators throughout, the various business value chains. And also, just to touch on Maha's excellent interventions, I would like to direct all of us, to the draft conceptual framework for the African continental strategy on artificial intelligence, which the AU published, I think, in October last year. Within it, it talks about mitigating AI bias by promoting gender sensitivity. I think there's a table within it that talks about women and girls empowerment towards full gender equality in all spheres of life, and also the impact of AI on bridging gender employment gaps, which was also raised. And then somewhere within the context, within the report, it talks about, there's actually a section on gender sensitivities and developing AI systems that are gender sensitive to ensure equal and opportunities. So that's just to build on, the excellent interventions that have already come up. And so first of all, let me start by expressing my sincere gratitude to the organizers, the UNFPA and the and Hero, really for enlightening me on this critical issue of technology facilitated gender-based violence, TF GBV, which turns out to be a challenge far more complex than I had previously understood. So thank you for that. In the words of Wangari Maathai, there comes a time when humility is called to shift to a new level of consciousness. And I think we would argue correctly that that time is now. So we are the victims of an emergent surveillance economy driven by surveillance capitalism. We see AI exacerbating gender-based violence generally through its biases that many people believe simply because the machine said it, and now it's made worse by deep fakes. We have to also consider that it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars each day to run AI models, thus making such models only affordable by those who already have the resources and power. For example, governments in advanced economies and large multinationals, which are the bastions of the existing flawed capitalist model that is at the core of what many of us believe needs to be fixed. We need to look beyond some of the models which I will list below and explore societal approaches, including open source business models, not-for-profit models, leveraging our unions, non-governmental opportunities, and ensuring that we always have multi-stakeholder input into developing, of the requisite governance and regulatory frameworks. Noting that regulation is like salt when cooking. Too much salt, spoils the meal, while too little salt makes the meal very, very bland. In an era, digital platforms can be weaponized against girls, and our collective is swift and comprehensive. And we do face a pressing demand for innovative business models that not only prioritize digital safety, but empower victims to deter perpetrators. The anonymity and reach of digital platforms, exacerbates gender-based violence, enabling harassment, the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, and stalking, all of which earlier speakers have spoken to very eloquently. And thus, our strategy must encompass the triad of education, policy reform, and technological information. And of course, as I had mentioned earlier, the reform of capitalism to address these challenges as effectively as possible. To that end, we must leverage business models aimed at creating safer digital environments. This includes developing secure reporting platforms, utilizing AI for monitoring and enhancing digital literacy, and fostering partnerships with various platforms. I believe our goal must be to ensure digital inclusion and safety, thereby unlocking the full potential of our communities. And so we do come to the role here of the private sector. So tech startups and the private sector are pivotal to introducing novel solutions for user protection and ethical product development. And one of the examples that I came up or researched was the Pathdisha app. And I think this illustrates the power of technology in providing safety tools and resources to combat GBV. Pathdisha, which means Pathfinder, is a safety app deployed in Calcutta metropolitan area and a few other parts of Western Bengal, India. The app is designed to address GBV-related issues. It offers pre-populated messages based on the type of incident, including sexual harassment and assault. It uses validated and analyzed crowdsourcing information to provide commuters with live tracking, estimated time of arrival, shared journeys, crowdsourcing of information. For example, how crowded is the bus? A journey planner, e-ticketing bookings, and alerts and related notifications. Now, coming back to the models, innovative business model combats violence with technology community engagement, have community engagement, and sit or foster strategic community partnerships to create sustainable and to be sustainable. Such models must have consistent revenue and a positive value proposition. And I think, as we noted from the advertising model, I think it drives home the notion that if you're not paying for it, you are not the customer of the product being sold. So let me models with a revenue possibilities. Number one, digital safe spaces platform. This could be a subscription-based service providing secure, moderated forums and support networks for survivors of GBV, offering anonymity and safety. It would employ advanced AI to monitor conversations for harmful content while providing privacy. Its revenue has to be from subscriptions from users, fundings from NGOs focused on gender equality and equity, and grants from companies investing in social impact initiatives. Two, technical or tech-enabled legal assistance. Some kind of platform connecting survivors of the TF GBV with legal advisors specializing in digital rights and cyber law. Again, utilizing AI to offer preliminary advice based on case details in the revenue, the service fees, consultations, partnership with law firms, and government philanthropic support for free services to those unable to afford them. The third model is education and training. This would possibly workshops on digital, online, and rights awareness. It would be tailored for schools, workplaces, and community groups, leveraging interactive platforms and online gamification, including, for example, cartoons and music for those who may not necessarily be functionally literate. So where would the money come from? Course subscription fees, licensing to educational institutions and corporations, and sponsorship from tech companies. Model 4, technology trust mark for safe platforms. This would probably encompass a certification program assessing and rating social media platforms, apps, and websites on their safety, especially their safety measures and responsiveness to TF GBV. And we would see it encourage adherence to best practices in user safety and privacy. The revenue, certification fees from technology companies, consulting services to improve platform safety standards, and governmental partnerships. AI again. Number 5, AI-powered content monitoring and response solutions. This model would offer AI solutions to platforms for identifying and responding to TF GBV content, including harassment and non-consensual sharing of images. It would integrate with existing social media and digital platforms. The revenue would probably come from licensing to platforms, service contracts for ongoing monitoring, and updates and partnerships with cybersecurity firms. Number 6, public-private partnership initiatives. The model here basically would involve collaborative projects between tech companies, governments, and NGOs to develop and implement technologies aimed at preventing TGBF, including funding innovation challenges and supporting startups with solutions for digital safety. The revenue would likely come from governments and philanthropic funding, corporate social responsibility budgets from tech companies, and innovation grants. And last but not least, some kind of model that I would title survivor empowerment platform. These platforms would empower survivors through advocacy, training, and community support, possibly using blockchain for secure, anonymous sharing of stories without fear of retribution. And the revenue for this model probably would likely come from donations, grants, and sponsorships, along with premium features for users. So those would be paid premium features for users seeking advanced personal development tools. The idea is that each of these models address the aspect of combating the to education, to legal and advocacy. And I think implementing these models requires multi-stakeholder collaboration to ensure that they're accessible, effective, and sustainable in the long term. Our efforts, though, must be underpinned by ethical considerations, emphasizing inclusivity, respect for human rights. And I think here the Global Partnership for Action exemplifies the type of collaborative effort required to address the TF GBV at its core. So, ladies and gentlemen, moment demands private sector, civil society, media, and international organizations must unite to invest in ethical and inclusive technology solutions that address gender-based violence generally. I just would like to add that to this end, the African Union Cybersecurity Experts Group supports efforts to eliminate TF-GBV, and indeed, collaboration is essential to advancing the Sustainable Development Goals and ensuring that no one is left behind. As Lema Bowie of Liberia notes, there is something in this world that every individual can do. It has created us all something unique. To quote former President Sirleaf, future generations will judge us not by what we say, but by what we do. Please, let us be inspired like Wangari Maathai, Lema Bowie, and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf to utilize technology for good. That we collectively in ethical and inclusive technological solutions to combat GBV and ensure a safer future for us all. Our mission is clear: to forge a path where technology serves as a beacon of safety and inclusivity, enabling every individual, especially Africa's daughters, to thrive free from violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abdul. You really did highlight good business models that could be used to protect human rights while addressing TF-GBV. And you are definitely right that we do need the right amount of salt to ensure that these tech models work. Mara, Abdul, Maha, Lucy, Rachel, thank you so much for your informative and insightful interventions. Over to you, Alexander.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amanda, for fantastic moderation and for all of the brilliant speakers. Every time I hear panelists speak, I learn, there's such an incredible depth to the work. So really, really grateful for having you here today. We will stop the live streaming because this marks the end